The short-term results of doing a 1 meal a day strategy on body composition are flabbergasting. It's literally like a squirrel driving an El Camino. And what I mean by that is, it's pretty darn amazing the results that I do see. But I have some serious beefs with 1 meal a day, and you've probably seen them before. But that being said, I understand in the short term, it's a good strategy. Well, kind of, because it works, but maybe it's not the best thing to do all the time. You see, I'm going to give you exactly what to do if you're going to eat 1 meal a day, like how you should sequence your food, because believe it or not, it makes a difference. But I also want to make sure you're getting the proper anabolic signaling. I don't want you to lose muscle because it's very easy to lose muscle with 1 meal a day. And the big overarching theme here is we have to remember that muscle is our largest metabolic driver. I don't care who you are. You could be a 70-pound female, you could be a 300-pound linebacker, I don't care. Muscle is still driving a lot of your metabolism, and if we continually lose that, we continually lose our metabolic drive. Okay, so if you do 1 meal a day, every day, eventually you're going to end up slowing down your metabolism. But we're going to talk about that in a second, because you might be thinking, well, I can easily get enough calories in each day. Well, that's not that hard to do. Calories are one thing, nutrient deprivation is another. I could sit down and have some keto coffee and add a butter to my coffee and this and that and get myself to 2,000 calories. That's not that big of a deal. But to be able to get the well-rounded array of nutrients that I need is pretty difficult. So without further ado, let's break this down. Full disclaimer, a lot of what I'm going to say in this video goes against the grain of my normal notions. Okay, it does, because we can't possibly eat 1 meal a day and abide by the rules that I would typically say over, when you're spacing your meals. Okay, there is a study that was published in the International Society of Sports Nutrition that published that when it came down to anabolic signaling and actually building muscle or retaining muscle, you should be consuming at least 0.4 to 0.5 grams per kilogram of body weight. But much more than that, and you start to oxidize the protein, it doesn't really go towards muscle. But they said that should be spaced out over 3 to 4 meals. Well, with traditional intermittent fasting, that's not hard to do because you can still have 3 or 4 meals and space it out. But with Omad, you can't. You're consolidated to 1 meal. So in essence, you can't consume, you could try, you could sit down and consume 100 grams of protein, but your body's only going to assimilate 30 or 40 grams of it, 50 grams, maybe 60 grams, depending on who you are. But I have some tricks that we can employ to be able to get more out of the protein that you're consuming. So let's just jump right in. We need to ramp up protein synthesis quick, okay, with little amounts of protein. So what I would recommend you do is you break your fast, I guess it's all breaking your fast, but you sequence it with this. Consume some bone broth, and along with that bone broth, a half a scoop of protein powder. Normally I would say a full scoop, but just a half a scoop, hear me out. And combine that with essential amino acids, EAAs. I am not a big fan of amino acids, okay? I've talked about that, but there are applications, but not BCAAs, not to be confused. EAAs. What we want is the leucine. There was a study that was published in the International Society of Sports Nutrition again that found that if there was a little bit of leucine combined with the protein shake, it 4x'd the assimilation and the protein synthesis associated with that shake. Now you might be wondering, why don't I do a full scoop and 4x that? Well, because then you're pretty much utilizing all your protein coming from a shake. I have a sequence here. We'll get to it, okay? So a half a scoop of protein powder, maybe that's 12, 15 grams of protein. You're 4xing the utilization of that protein, okay? What that does is that basically turns on the switch, okay? You are now in anabolic mode. You're no longer fasting and you've spiked this anabolic signaling very high. 5 to 10 minutes later, yes, I still think that constitutes as 1 meal. Some might say it's 2, but try to pace yourself, wait for 5 or 10 minutes, and then have lean meat. Do not, I repeat, do not have a fatty cut of meat, okay? Saturated fat at this point in time can trigger a heavy inflammatory response because of the lipopolysaccharides that can leach through a kind of a broken gut mucosal layer after a longer fast. After 20 to 24 hours of fasting, your gut is a little bit weaker. So lean cuts of meat, lean filet, lean chicken, lean turkey, lean fish, lean shrimp, things like that, alongside steamed vegetables. Do not fry them, do not cook them in oil at this point, steam them so it breaks down the cellulose wall so they absorb better and do not cause gut distress. I cannot overemphasize how important that is. My recommendation for meat is down below with ButcherBox because their meat is lean and it is what I consider to be very, very high quality, grass-fed, grass-finished, good poultry, good chicken, good fish options as well. So there's a link down below if you want to check them out, and it gets delivered to your doorstep. So it's super easy, super convenient. They've been a supporter of this channel for over 3 years. So super awesome brand, happy to be associated with them. And again, if you're watching this video, you get access. Utilize that special link down below in the description after you watch this video if you want some good break fast strategy meats for Omad or any other fasting for that matter. Personally, I'm a big fan of their fillets and also a really big fan of their cod too. So check that out down below. This next one, number 3, okay? After you've had your lean protein or right along with it, do not be afraid of spiking your insulin. Do not be afraid of carbohydrates in this particular case. Okay, look, we cannot have it all. We always tend to think that insulin is like the big monster. And I get it, it kind of is, but it's not the one independent controlled spike of insulin. It's our society and our constant spike of insulin and our constant insulin levels being high. Okay, if we control our insulin in one controlled meal, that's not that big of a deal. It's the chronic elevation that's a problem. And insulin, like it or not, is a big driver of anabolism, of muscle growth. And you probably think, I'm not trying to build muscle, Thomas. What the heck are you talking about? You're not trying to build muscle? Well, you kind of are. Because in this case, we're trying to maintain. While you are fasting, you have things like growth hormone and stuff like that that are being secreted that are at least protecting you a little bit from breaking down protein in your body. But once you break your fast, those growth hormone levels drop. And it is now up to insulin to take over. Okay, so a big spike of insulin is going to be your friend at this point in time. So call me completely insane, but I would not even be opposed to you having a glass of juice. Probably the only time I would ever say it, because I need you to get your insulin somewhat high so that protein can actually get into the cell and go through protein synthesis. Hate me, unsubscribe, whatever, at least I'm honest, right? Then right after that, you would add in your complex carbohydrates. I would recommend like chickpeas or lentils or something like that. So what you're doing here is you're spiking your insulin high with something that's relatively high glycemic, rice cakes, rice, of course, like I mentioned, juice. Then you're adding some chickpeas later on. You don't need to add a lot, but what we're trying to do here is what that's going to do is that's going to cause this insulin to spike high, but then the chickpeas are going to make it last a tiny bit longer. Not too long, but long enough that we may get the chance to at least use more of the protein we consumed. Okay, so if you just consumed 6-7 ounces of meat after your protein shake, a lot of that would go to waste, but if we can keep the insulin levels high for just a little bit after your meal, we run at least the potential positive risk of absorbing some of that protein, right? So it's a good thing. Then we get into the one where it's just, I have no choice but to contradict myself because this is one meal a day. We have to break rules. Normally I would space meals apart, but in this case, I can't have you do one meal a day with protein and carbs forever and never add fats in. So where do the fats come in? They come in right here after we've consumed some of the carbohydrates. Now, there was one of my favorite studies published in the journal Cell that found that the mitochondria, what produces energy, do not respond well to fats and carbs at the same time. Okay, glycolysis and lipid utilization require completely different things, and they actually antagonize each other. So our cells use one fuel at a time better. But in this case, what do? Okay, we do ultimately result in what's called metabolic gridlock, where the cells are kind of like, what are you giving me? But what else do we do? So what fats do we use? Well, we lean into quicker absorbing fats. Okay, so in this case, I do want the MCT oil in there if your stomach can handle it. This goes against the grain of my normal notions, right? I do want the olive oil, but what I would recommend is having some of these fats that also go along with a fiber. Okay, so taking like a guacamole, for instance, and fortifying it with a couple tablespoons of olive oil. That way you're making a fattier guacamole that's got a little bit of olive oil that has some benefits in there too. I'm gonna do another video that breaks down how to do OMAD if you're keto, so we'll talk about that because there's some different fats there. Anyhow, moving on. The next thing that you would do, pretty much the last thing, if you are not trying to build muscle, you can call it a day here. Okay, get your calories there. If you are trying to actually maintain or build more muscle, you may want to add some kind of caseinate protein. Okay, some kind of a cottage cheese, good quality cottage cheese. Why? Because it digests like 60% slower. Then you're having a slow trickle of amino acids. Okay, the downside is if you're going right into another fast, it's kind of delaying that a little bit, but that's neither here nor there, I suppose. So the cottage cheese is a way to kind of wrap it up and say, okay, here's some slower digesting protein that might trickle in over the next couple of hours. All of these things combined create a pretty large, drawn-out meal. Don't be surprised if you were sitting down and eating for 20 or 30 minutes. But if it's your one meal a day, you have to sequence it a certain way. And I'd say the biggest hack out of all of this that we've learned is leveraging the power of EAAs along with that protein shake. That's a great way to sort of intro your meal, then you move into the clean protein. So let's just recap really quick and paint a big picture, and I'll give you a little bit more specific numbers. Okay, so you want 1 cup of bone broth, along with a half a scoop of protein powder. You can literally make that into a shake if you want. Half a scoop of protein powder, pea or whey, whatever you choose in this case. Okay, along with 1 to 2 scoops of essential amino acids, preferably getting up to 5 grams of leucine. Okay, then 5 to 10 minutes later, you're going to have 5 to 8 ounces of lean meat, shrimp, chicken, turkey, fish, whatever. Okay, then with that, you're having steamed vegetables. Okay. That way you're having the meat and the veggies. And again, I recommend ButcherBox, which is down below if you haven't checked them out already. The next component along with that is the higher glycemic carbohydrate. You're going to get a higher insulin spike if you just have some juice, I'm telling you, because otherwise you're going to get full if you have the rice. That's just the way it goes. I hate the juice, but whatever, it works. But then after that, you're bringing in just a couple ounces or however much you really want of like a chickpea pasta or chickpeas or lentils or a lentil pasta, probably about 5 ounces cooked of that. You're going to be very full after this, in which case you bring in the fats right after that. 1 to 2 tablespoons of MCT oil or 3 to 4 total tablespoons of olive oil, and maybe 1 to 2 tablespoons of olive oil if you mix it in with avocado. Okay, so you're really trying to go for roughly like 30-ish to 40-ish grams of fat is kind of the goal. And then lastly, you go ahead and you add in the slow digesting protein if that's your goal, like a cottage cheese or dare I say a casein protein, which I would not recommend, like a casein protein powder. That is how you break an OMAD fast if you are not following keto. As always, keep it locked in here on my channel. I'll see you tomorrow.